Now when I open this image, it comes in as what we refer to as a flattened image, meaning it has no layers in it, it has no paths, and it is basically just a flattened image, just like a JPEG or something you would pull down off the internet or load off of a CD-ROM. And you'll notice when Photoshop brings it in, it defaults to the label background, because that's exactly what it is. It's a locked off background. There are a lot of things you can do to this, but there are a lot of things that you can't do to it because it is a background. If I were to grab one of my selection tools and come in here and select part of this, it's like, okay, I want to cut a hole in this image and get rid of that portion of it. Well, if I just hit my delete key, oh well, that doesn't look too great, because what's happening is it's not recognizing that there's any transparency yet in this document, because it is the background, and in theory you can't go any deeper than the background, so there's nothing for it really to cut to. So what Photoshop is doing when I hit the delete key is it is filling that space with our background color, which at this point happens to be black. So if I undo this, get rid of our marquee selection, you can go and you can change this layer into, or change this background into a layer. There are a couple of different ways to do that. The easiest and quickest, and I should probably cover these icons with you real quick. Down here is our trash can. If we had more than one layer in here, we could drag a layer to the trash can, and that gets excuse me, we could drag that layer to the trash can, and that gets rid of it, takes it out of the project for us. There is the create new layer icon. If you click on it, guess what, creates a new layer. We don't want that in there right now, so just to illustrate, I'll drag that to the trash. It goes away. We'll still have our background. This other icon, and in newer versions of Photoshop there are several more that help you control selection sets and all of that. But when we have a layer active, this is a layer mask icon, and we're going to use it quite extensively later on. But to get this converted from a background to an actual layer, what we want to do, there are two ways, probably more ways, but there are two ways that I'm familiar with. And the easiest way is just to take this, and instead of creating a new layer, we're just going to drag it down, clicking with my left mouse button, I'm going to drag it down to that create new layer icon, and that's exactly what it does. It creates a duplicate. So I'm going to turn this original off, and we'll have it as a backup. If we need to go to it in its original state at some point in the project, we'll have it. But right now it's turned off. And if this little eyeball icon that comes on shows you that that particular layer is visible in the project. And the little paintbrush that is beside that shows you, and I think this has gone away also in the newest versions, but it tells you that that's the active layer, and that's the layer that you're going to be editing if you do anything to it. So now if we grab our selection tool and we go back out here and pull out our marquee and we hit delete, well, it's quite a different result. We're actually now have a layer above our background, so Photoshop says, hey, there's nothing between this layer and the background, so it creates transparency, and this grid that you see in the background is Photoshop's way of telling you, hey, that is a transparent area. There are no pixels in that area. I'll jump into my history palette and we'll put that back in place and drop our selection. You will learn to rely on the history palette, trust me. There were versions of Photoshop before, and I forget where the history palette actually made its appearance. It might have been in this 5.0 version where you didn't, all you could do was undo the last step. And I know that sounds really crazy, but at one point in time that's the way it was. And still, just working in here, you can undo the last step you did, but if you want to go with the Control Z, but if you want to go any further than that, that history palette's going to be your best buddy. Alright, so working on this guitar, and we talked earlier about the Magic Wand tool, and in this case it's going to be a real easy way of getting the selection we want and starting to develop some transparency in our project. If you were working from an actual photograph of a guitar, it might not work so well for you because you would have specular highlights and reflections along the edges that might blend into your background, and if you selected it, you wouldn't get this clean selection along this black line that we have currently, because some of those highlights would actually, they wouldn't have any dark pixels between them and the white background. So it would end up selecting inside the body of the guitar, and it would be just a mess. In that case, you would use your pen tool and your Bezier curves to create that path all the way around the guitar, get the nodes set, or the points set exactly where you want them, and then you go in, control click your path icon, and that would give you your selection that you've created with the pen tool. We don't need to do that on this one, so just to make sure we all understand what we're doing here, we have our image. It is a layer now and not the background. We can grab our magic wand and just click in the white anywhere outside of the guitar body, and it selects all of those pixels outside the guitar body. So then it's just a matter of hitting the delete key, and we have a nice clean selection, and we are now creating transparency, and this is going to give us the flexibility to do some really cool things later on, and it's critical to doing the things that we're doing, because we only want to affect certain portions of this image, and this is the basics. This is the backbone of what we're going to be working with in these tutorials. So once we have this shape, we're pretty much ready to march forward and to start doing the actual design work on our guitar. So I'm to the point now that I'm really happy with this project. I'm going to do a Control S and save this, and we call this tutorial guitar. So I'm going to make sure, yep, I'm going to save over that. So now we have our tutorial guitar.psd file, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to come down to my create new layer icon, and I'm going to click that one time, and I get a clean layer. There's currently nothing on this layer, so if I turn that eyeball on and off, there's nothing on the layer. It's a clean layer. You're not going to see anything. So we'll bring up our guitar shape below it. Now remember, when we were in the path tool and there was a path in there, we could hover over our icon and control click it, and you can do this in a layer for a layer icon as well. And the reason this is really cool, and there are a couple of ways to do this, I'll show you both of them, is that while these tools do some interesting things, they're not at all suited for complex shapes. Even the lasso tool, you could go in here and, you know, spend a day trying to get around this. But if you look at this, even just clicking, it's a series of polygonal lines. It's not a true curve. It's not going to give you the accuracy that you can get with the pen tool and a Bezier spline. The easiest way to get that selection that we want is to control click, hover above your icon, hold down the control key, and click with the left mouse button on that icon. And you see now we have the marching ants all around the outside of our guitar. Instantaneous, perfect selection around exactly the pixels that we want. So I'm going to clear this selection. And there's another way to do this. It doesn't always make sense to do it, but there are situations where you want to get in and grab just a tiny part of something, and maybe you've got a rasterized text or another logo element or something, or whatever that someone has given you, and it's not on its own layer, but you want to just tweak some of the letters a little bit. You can go in and surround them with a marquee, then grab your move tool, and you can nudge. When the move tool is selected, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard to nudge whatever is within that selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my left arrow key and I'm going to nudge it one time and watch what happens to our selection. Well, okay, that's stupid. I was on the wrong layer. So I'm going to take my arrow key and I'm going to, the left arrow key, and I'm going to nudge it one time, make sure my layer's selected there. I'm just going to nudge it one time, and basically one pixel, and watch what happens to our marching ants. Okay, Photoshop knows there's nothing else on that layer except that shape of that guitar. And I nudged it back over one pixel just to put it back where it was. So if you have a complex shape, you can just surround it with a selection tool, nudge it one pixel, it makes the perfect selection around it, nudge it back into position, and then you can move that part anywhere you want, do whatever you want with it.